Welcome to the place where people of faith find real answers. We believe women deserve more than just religious band-aids for their most difficult and destructive relationships. And now for today's episode of Relationship Truth Unfiltered. Welcome, I'm Julie Sedenko here with relationship expert Leslie Vernick. Today we're talking about making decisions when you feel like everything's on your shoulders, especially if you're dealing with the spouse who won't engage or is actively trying to make things harder. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or stuck in your decision making, you don't want to miss this episode. Leslie, I am so glad you're here today. Help us.
Yeah, I think decision making is hard for a lot of reasons, and especially when you're trying to co-decision make with a partner who may not be good at decision making either, or disengaged, or you're not having a great communication style. But I think one of the biggest problems that I see for people who are trying to make decisions is they're always stressed about making the perfect decision. And I think if we could just start with that, because no one knows everything about everything. And so sometimes you make a decision and then you find out a week later or a year later, or, oh, I wish I would have made a different decision, because now you have more information. And I think this is a really important concept that we start with, Julie, because I think a wrong decision can be helpful because it gives you more information to turn around and do something different. So if we're continually afraid to make any decision, it's sort of like we're standing at a crossroads. And this was all before GPS and all of the things that we have now. We're standing at the crossroads. Do I turn right or do I turn left? I don't know. How do I make this decision? Is Walmart this way or this way? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. So we are stuck in indecision. And once we make a decision, okay, I think Walmart is to the left. And so we start driving down the left street, and we're driving and driving and driving and driving. No Walmart. Oh, well, that gives us information. Now we can turn around and go to the right. And so if we could have that idea about decisions as, hey, we can self-correct along the way if we get more information, then we don't feel as paralyzed that we're making the wrong decision, or what if I make the wrong decision? If I make the wrong decision, most things are not life critical in decision making, and we can turn around and go a different way.
I was in a play a long time ago, a really fun play. I got to be Helen Keller's mother in The Miracle Worker. And the guy that played Helen Keller's father, we went out to coffee after practice one night, and he had been divorced. He was in a new relationship, and he really loved this lady, but he was absolutely terrified of marrying her because what if it didn't turn out again? And thank God he did. And they have an absolutely amazing marriage now. And they're very, very happy. But I remember him sharing his fear of what if, what if, what if. And I think that does make so many of us freeze and maybe not make a decision at all.
Yeah, and that's a decision. So I think that's really important for us to see that passivity and paralysis are decisions to not do anything. And that creates an outcome as well.
It's hard though when you feel like you're just drowning in decision making because your husband won't participate at all. And how do you deal with that when you're the one having to make all the decisions?
I think this is a really important question, Julie, because even this is a decision. You get to decide how you want to handle someone not participating in decision making. You can handle it with resentment. You can handle it with anger and bitterness. Or you can handle it with curiosity. I wonder why it's so hard for him to join me on decision making. Maybe he got really clobbered when he made a mistake when he was a child, and he's so afraid of making a mistake. And have I blamed him? Have I, come down really hard when he's made a decision, and therefore he's kind of washed his hands of decision making? So you can handle it with resentment. You can handle it with curiosity. You can handle it with acceptance. Yeah, for now, he's not really good at this, or he's not really willing to participate. And so decisions have to be made. So I'm going to put my big girl pants on and make some decisions for our family that need to be made, because the kids need to go to school and we need to spend money here and the house needs to be fixed there, and he doesn't want to participate. And so I'm going to do that, but it's not going to be with resentment. I don't want to do it with resentment. I'm going to make decisions as an adult person for the welfare of me, my kids, and my family.
This is something I've had to really, really deal with in my own marriage. I didn't realize, and I think my husband would admit it now, he's not a great decision maker. Or I guess he makes a decision, but then that's the decision. And if it doesn't work out, he's really not good at changing the game plan at all. So, when we lost our shirts, and I mean lost our shirts in 2007 when we moved from California to the Midwest, and we just weren't making it. and he did not know how to pivot at all. And it became this huge argument between the two of us. And finally, I just realized after years though, that it wasn't necessarily because he's a bad person, because honestly, I'd started to feel like he was. I felt like he was actively working against the family because he wouldn't work with me, or we would talk and he would say one thing and do another. And we just couldn't make a decision of what are we going to do to deal with this problem. And I felt like I was losing my mind. But there really is this thing where people just, it scares them. I mean, even when I mentioned before he had skin cancer, it was obvious on his face. And he was just terrified to go to the doctor. And even just recently, I asked him, like, what was the deal with that? And now he's just kind of embarrassed. But it's true. He can sometimes be overly passive and scared.
He told you, I'm scared. I'm scared of the outcome. I'm scared if I make a decision. I'm scared if I go to the doctor and find out more information that my problem on my face is cancer. Then what decision do I make? And so I think if we can look at this problem with one another, whether it's our children who don't make good decisions or don't make decisions, or our mom who won't make a good decision about what her care should look like as she's getting older. Even my dad, he's 95, and I've asked him some questions, and he's saying, I don't want to think about it now. You take care of it after I die. He doesn't want to make certain decisions. I think certain decisions, my husband and I have been arguing for about 10 years now, because I keep asking him, if you die before me, do you want to be cremated or do you want to be in a casket? And he says, I don't know. And he just doesn't want to make that decision because it's a pretty scary decision. Like, hey, do you want to get burned up and stay in an urn, or do you want to go in the ground and turn into dust? And so I think if we could have compassion and curiosity, just like when you asked your husband, why was it so hard? Maybe we don't get so filled up with resentment when someone is weak in an area that we wanted them to be stronger in. I think as we get married, one of the things that we have to learn, and this often doesn't happen, is that we're now adults and we have to learn adult skills. And that doesn't end when you turn 21. That is a lifelong journey. And depending on the kind of house that you grew up in and how much freedom you were given to make decisions and how much shame you got if you made a wrong one, kind of sometimes paralyzes people when they move into adulthood. And I think for women especially, there's also another injunction that once you get married, you're not supposed to make the decisions. Your husband's supposed to be the leader. He's supposed to make the decisions. And so we put this huge burden on men that you've got to do it and you've got to do it right because everybody depends on you. And I think that's a little unfair. And some husbands take that reign and be oppressive and controlling and abusive. And we talk a lot about that in the podcast. And some husbands completely abdicate that responsibility. And if we're curious, it's not because I don't care. It's because I'm scared to death.
Like in my husband's case, he went to 3 different high schools. His dad was a pastor, and so they changed churches and did different things, and he just moved a lot. So his thing was, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to get a career, and that's what I'm going to do. And it's not going to change. So, when the whole world turned upside down on him, it was really like, I don't want to change. I don't want to do that. He didn't want to repeat what happened to him and leaving his hometown. That was really, really hard for him because he didn't want to be moving all over the place. But for me as a young wife, I didn't understand it because I was like, well, let's just do this. Let's just do that. It wasn't really a problem for me. And so I think you're right. Just trying to understand them and maybe setting aside our vision of what a man should be like and that they should be this or that. It was hard for me to do as well. What do you do though when you're on the other end of the spectrum and you're not allowed to make decisions? You're supposed to just sit there and let him make all the decisions, even when he's wrong, even when he's damaging your finances and everything else.
That's our audience. Our audience. So we want to share both sides because not everyone who's listening is in a destructive marriage for sure, and every man isn't a bad man or bad woman, but there are both ignorant men who have been taught that their role is to make all the decisions as the head of the house. And they believe that's what God mandates them to do. And so they take this idea that I am to take over your life and control everything as the head. That's my responsibility. And it's truly a belief, and it's not meant to be oppressive or disrespectful, but it becomes that way enters into marriage. And this is where the submissive wife who goes along with that wrong thinking theologically, and then she becomes more passive, especially if she hasn't been passive in her life and she has been a decision maker. She's been an independent woman. She made her own money. She has her own house, all those kind of things. And all of a sudden, she's supposed to be silenced and passive. It often creates a lot of tension, resentment, and conflict in a relationship. Control over someone is never God's intent for healthy adult relationships. And so the whole idea of headship doesn't mean I get the final say, I get to make all the choices. So a woman who's married to a man who believes that, you're going to have to push back a little bit, and not in a disrespectful way, but even in just a, I don't believe it the same way you do. I don't think that's what God is really saying. I think that headship means that you are responsible to serve first, to lead first. That's what God says in his word to his disciples when he talks about head. You may disagree, but I don't believe that as a wife, I have no voice or no choice. I disagree with this decision. I don't want to do this. I think it's really important for women to learn to speak up for themselves and have voice and have choice, even if their husband is unhappy with that. Because part of his role and your role as a wife is to mature through this relationship. I mean, how many of you who are moms have matured through the voice of your child who said, Mommy, you're scaring me. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be that kind of mom. Right. And so you self-correct. You begin to say, wow, I've got to regulate my temper. I can't act this way when I'm dysregulated. My kids are getting scared. And so you learn to manage your emotions. You learn to grow in new ways through these littles that God has given you. And I think family life is meant to teach us all kinds of spiritual lessons, like how do you forgive when no one sins against you? You don't know how to do that until someone sins against you, and you have to learn how to do it. How do you learn to get rid of resentment? If you live alone, you're not resentful toward anybody in particular. But when you live in a family, you get full of resentment lots of times. How do you learn to let it go if you're not in relationship with people who irritate you in ways that you wish they didn't? These are lessons that we learn in the family of God and in our family of origins and in our marriage family. And so I think we can benefit a lot if we quit thinking that we have to have this little happy family that everybody has to agree and everybody has to do it this way. And if we understand that conflict and stress are meant to teach us skills on the outside, how to solve problems, how to work through difficulties, and skills on the inside, how to manage our temper, how to forgive, how to regulate our emotions. And these are all skills that we need to become the person that God's called us to be.
That kind of leads us into one of the teachings that you have that I think is really powerful, and that is acting out of your noble self. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
God tells us who we are by our virtues, by our gifts that he's given us. So when he says, you are perfect in my eyes, when he called Gideon, he said, Gideon, you are a mighty warrior. Now, in Judges chapter 6, at the time God called Gideon a mighty warrior, when Jesus called Peter, you are the rock, neither one of them felt that way. Gideon argues with God. He says, who, me? I'm not a warrior. I'm just a weenie little farmer from the least tribe of Benjamin. I don't have any warrior blood in me, God. That's not who I am. And so our noble self is the person that God designed us to be. From the moment he put you in your mother's womb, he says, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and I have purpose for you. You are my workmanship, created for purpose in my story. Your story will be part of my story. So our job as human beings is to figure that out, not figure out what we're supposed to do necessarily, but who we're supposed to be. And that's our noble self. And so God says, hey, put off your old self in Ephesians 5. Put on your new self that was created to be like me. You're an image bearer, but your behaviors, your attitudes, your thoughts, your internal world doesn't look like me. Put off your anger, put on love, put off resentment, put on forgiveness. And so our noble self is built out of character qualities that we and God have worked out that he wants us to embody to represent his image. And I think it's helpful if we take a couple of them. So for me, when I think of the virtues that I want my grandchildren to say, this was my grandma at my funeral, they're not going to say, oh, my grandma was an author of 7 books, or that doesn't matter to them at all. What they're going to say is, my grandma loved me. My grandma was generous. She paid for our Christian schooling, right? So these are things that I want to be. I want to be generous. I want to be loving. I want to be creative. They'll say, she painted me pictures. She taught me how to paint. So you think, as a listener, what are some of the qualities that are the desires of your heart? That's when God says, follow the desires of your heart. That's not follow your feelings. My feelings are oftentimes completely contrary to who I want to be. I feel selfish. I feel resentful. I feel exhausted. I don't want to be loving. I want to be left alone, right? And so our feelings are important informants, but they're not who we are. They just inform us. Just like your car, the check oil light is not your car. It's your warning bell that you need to tend to your car. And so our feelings are our warning that we need to tend to our noble self, because our noble self may be compromised if we allow our feelings to be in charge.
I think a lot of our audience would envision a noble woman as the typical church lady, submissive and sweet, sacrificing, all these things. But I don't know if that's the total picture of how God sees women. For me, working for a major Christian denomination, it was hard because, as you know, I'm more of the outspoken type and a little bit of a stronger personality. And so it was hard to put on the skirt and be the secretary, because that's just not really who I am. But that was kind of what I was expected to be. And there were times, honestly, Leslie, where I felt like I was somehow bad.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Julie. And I felt that way too, because I'm a more stronger personality. I think let's take this out of the marriage realm, because when a woman has a strong personality and she gets married, she's often squashed if she's married to a controlling man who wants to be in charge of everything. But you're right, in ministry, opportunities at church, with her children, with PTA or whatever volunteer organization she's involved in, if she's involved in work, what does God say about the characteristics of a healthy, spiritually mature person? And so he says a couple things that I'll just camp on, because this has a lot to do with decision making. So he gives us a brain, and he gave one to women as well. So when he created Adam, he made him in God's image with a brain that can think and make decisions and be creative and have ideas. And when he made Eve, he made her in God's image as well. In the image of God, he created human beings, male and female, Genesis says. And so the female is not just the robot to serve the male. She's not brainless. She's not thoughtless. She's not someone who just has roles. She has purpose and she has value, and God made her that way. So when we think about who does God call to be mature, what does that look like? I've asked pastors this, and it's interesting because when we talk about a mature man in the faith, what does a mature male look like? They'll list all kinds of wonderful attributes, like he's kind, he's humble, he's loving, he's strong, he's got good decision-making abilities, he's a leader, he's courageous. So they've got these mixture of male and female attributes. If we think about the archetypes of male and female, so male is the courageous, strong decision maker, and the feminine is more of the humble, generous, loving. And when they describe mature males, they have both of those qualities imbibed. You could not have a mature male if he wasn't humble, loving, and kind, because a mature male that's all masculine is going to be a bully, is going to be a dictator. So they're not mature, godly men. But in the feminine, or what does a mature, godly woman look like? When I've asked pastors in the past, they typically list all the feminine attributes. She's humble, she's loving, she's sacrificial, she's gracious, she's kind, she's, giving. And those are all wonderful qualities for a woman, for sure. But they're not completing her in the image of God. Because if the image of God contains masculine and feminine, then a mature female, just like a mature male, would contain masculine and feminine. And so she should also have some courageousness, some decisiveness, all of the things that we would say make a good man a man and make a healthy person a person, have to be part of the female maturing as well. And so when we think about the godly woman, when we think about Proverbs 31, it's not what she did, that was cultural. But who she was: strength, and dignity are her clothing. And because of that, she smiles at the future unafraid. And this Proverbs 31 woman made all kinds of decisions without her husband. She bought a field, she managed her money, she had a business. She was a decision maker. And so women who are Christian and want to be godly women need to embrace that part of their being to learn to make decisions and make good ones and not be afraid that that's not godly.
Ever feel like your sanity depends on someone else's choices? Like their destructive patterns are slowly destroying both of you? Let me guess, you've tried everything. Praying harder, loving more, walking on eggshells, and nothing's changing except you. You're becoming someone you don't even recognize anymore. What if I told you there's a way out? A way to break free from this crazy cycle without losing your faith or your compassion? Mark your calendar. February 13th could be the day that changes everything. Leslie is offering a powerful free webinar that day, one where you'll discover why trying to fix their problem keeps you stuck, and you'll learn exactly how to break free. There are 2 times to choose from, 12:30 or 7 p.m. Eastern. Register now at leslievernick.com/OK. That's leslievernick.com/OK. Stop letting someone else's choices steal your life. Your future is waiting, and it's a good one. And I think, too, there are some women who are just better in some areas. They might be better at managing the finances or even buying the home or whatever it would be. You know, my husband's incredibly talented when it comes to building anything, fixing anything, the car, whatever. But there's these other areas where he's not so great in. So I have to maybe fill in the gaps and vice versa. So I think just because we imagine that the guy is going to be this take charge kind of person and handle the money, well, not really, not if he's terrible at it.
Well, I think one of the wake up calls for women in marriage and men too is that, and I think Beth Moore said it best in one of her books when she said, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not Barbie, he's not Ken, and this is no dream house. I think we have, and even in our membership of Conquer, we've had some comments of women saying, I thought I was going to live happily ever after and find my Prince Charming. We have this idea that we're going to get this perfect guy, and he's going to have all the skills, all the abilities, all the qualities that we need to take care of us, and we don't have to mature. And he has the same feeling. I'm going to marry this amazing woman who's going to cook and take care of me and give me sex whenever I want. I don't have to mature. And that's just not true. Each of us have to mature. I've been married a long time to the same person, and we are not the same people that we were when we got married 49 years ago. But a good marriage does that. And so your friend who is afraid to get married because it might fail, marriages fail because the people in the marriages are not willing to do the work to mature, that the problem in front of them gives them the opportunity to learn, whatever that problem is, whether it's infidelity, whether even abuse. So we've had stories, not a lot of them, because there's a pride issue of wanting to humble myself and not wanting to humble myself. And so when abuse is in a marriage and a woman is strong enough to lovingly confront that and say, hey, I love you and I wish we could make this work, but I won't live like this. I am not your slave and you are not my master. God is my master and I take my marching orders from him, not from you. When she's strong enough to say that in a godly way and he listens and humbles himself and recognizes I've been a bully husband and that isn't who God wants me to be, each of them have changed and created a new marriage, a new story to their marriage. But that often doesn't work because of pride and stubbornness and resentment and all of the kind of things that get in the way of good decision making as well as healthy maturity. And so marriages do end because the people in the marriages, and it's not just the woman who's supposed to suck it up and be the heroic sacrifice to keep the marriage together and let her husband continue to harm her. That's not in God's word at all.
I think what you're describing, just because you tell your husband, I won't live like this, I would guess most of the time he's not going to just revert right to repentance and he's just suddenly going to get it. So those boundaries that you teach and having those boundaries, that is so important so that you're not spinning out of control and anger and resentment, but you have your boundary. You truly don't live that way. And eventually he does get the message that he can either get on board or not. But you do make a choice, and that leads, I guess, to my next question. We have a lot of ladies who say, "I don't have any choices," but that's really not true. Why?
We always have choices. All right. So let's just break it down into some simple ways. So I often hear, and when I was counseling, I would hear this a lot from women who were leaving a destructive man. And they would say, it's so unfair. I just have to take care of the kids. I have to earn all the money. He doesn't pay any child support. I have to clean the house. I have to do the homework. I have to, do all the laundry. I just hate my life. I hate my life. This isn't fair. I have to do everything. And so one time I heard that from a woman who was mature enough to hear what I was going to say back. I wouldn't say it to everybody.
I can already hear what you're gonna say back, but go ahead.
And so I said to her, actually, you don't have to. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I don't know, you could leave your kids alone for the night and go party. You could spend your money on things you want to spend your money on. You don't have to do their homework for them. They could flunk out of kindergarten or first grade or whatever grade they're in. In fact, you could actually put them in foster care if they were that much of a burden for you. You have choices. And she looked at me like I had lost my mind as the Christian counselor. And she said, I would never do that. And I said, of course you wouldn't, because your noble self wouldn't let you. That's not who you are. You're a good mother. So why are you robbing yourself of the feeling of being a good mother with all your resentment that you have no choices? You have choices.
Because it feels like you don't have a choice. I mean, obviously, I guess you can put them in foster care, but yeah, your noble self is like,
No way, I'm not doing that,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you not let that resentment build up? Because no, you're not going to put your kids in foster care. So it does feel in a way like you're cornered into this.
But you have, see, as soon as you see you have choices, then you recognize I'm making a choice to be a good mother. And a good mother does things that are sacrificial sometimes. And another lesson you might need to learn all this is a good mother also has boundaries, right? A good mother says, I can't do this for you right now. Mommy needs a break. I'm not doing this for you right now. I have to get to work. No, I can't drive you and your friends to the mall. I don't have any money to spend. Right? And so you don't have to be the perfect mother, that whatever that is in your mind. But as your noble self, you're saying, I choose to be the good mother, even if he's the bad father. And I can't change him. I can only manage me. But I have choices. I could be a bad mother too. And that's not who I want to be. That's sometimes how I feel. I just want to get rid of these kids. Leave me alone. All of us feel that way. We don't talk about it as women. We don't talk about the thoughts that we have or the feelings that we have. I wish I never had these kids. I hate being a mother. Sometimes we all have those thoughts and those feelings. That's why they don't drive our decisions. Or we would be giving our kids up for adoption every day, right? But that's not our decision maker. That's just how we feel. But when we get to that place where we feel that way, then we need to decide, wow, I'm being stretched way too thin. I need some boundaries. I need some help. I need to make some changes. Maybe not giving my kids up for adoption, but maybe not doing everything for them that they can be doing for themselves. And these are lessons that you as an adult woman will learn and pass on to your children as you're struggling through these different difficulties.
So is having those boundaries what kind of keeps you from being and living in resentment and anger?
Having boundaries helps you exercise your power of choice. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And then the next obstacle for you when you do that with children or any other human being is living with their resentment toward you that you aren't doing it, right? So your kids are going to be mad at you. They're going to be disappointed with you. Your mother's going to be unhappy that you're not willing to drive 8 hours for Christmas dinner with them because you're exhausted and you have no money for gas and they don't offer to pay it. So when you make decisions that are good for you and ultimately good for your family, because your family, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first, right? So you can't be the good mother that you want to be or the good person or the godly woman that you want to be if you're frazzled, exhausted, aren't sleeping, aren't eating properly, can't exercise. You need to take care of you, not in a self-indulgent, I need to spend all the money on my nails and toenails, but in a healthy, self-respectful stewardship kind of way, so that you have the energy and the mindset to be the parent your kids need and you want to be. Your kids aren't going to like a good parent. right? Your kids want someone who just lets them do what they want, right? Even our grandkids, when I'm with them, I'm like, turn off your phone. Turn off your phone. They don't like that. They don't like me saying that. And I'm not even their parent to say that, but I'm saying, hey, I don't get much time with you. I want to spend time with you. Turn off your phone. And that's a good grandparent. That's a good person in their life. But as a kid, you're immature. They don't say, oh, thanks, Nana, for reminding me I shouldn't spend that much time on my phone. So decision making sometimes is really hard, especially for women who are so attached to people's opinion of them. They're attached to being the good guy and not the bad guy, and everybody liking them and nobody being mad with them and nobody being upset with their decision. And so this is another obstacle that women have in decision making. It's not that they can't make the decision. They know exactly the right decision to make. They're just afraid of the repercussions. And sometimes there are some repercussions in good decision making.
Leslie, I know you've worked with so many women. What are some of the most surprising things that you've seen happen from women who've made this change and they're starting to make decisions from their noble self instead of their emotions?
Well, I don't think it's surprising to me so much as it's surprising to them. So it's surprising to them how much better they feel about themselves. So feelings are kind of so fickle because you feel so scared to have someone mad at you, for example. And then you do it, you set a boundary, and they're mad at you. They break up with you, whatever they do to you, and you handle it, and you're like, wow, I feel kind of good that I did it, and I handled it, and I managed their anger. I didn't flip out and retaliate. And you may not feel good about the relationship. The relationship may end or the relationship may be in turmoil right now, but there's a feeling of strength and dignity that comes to you that feels really good. Or let's say that your kids are driving you crazy and you react and you yell and you shame them and you vomit your angst all over them and they go cowering off to their bedroom and you go cowering off to your bedroom. How do you feel in that moment? You feel like a lousy mom. You feel like a horrible parent because feelings are fickle. There you felt all angry and resentful and ready to give it to them and you gave it to them. And now you feel horrible as a parent. And so when you learn to recognize that and make good decisions and say, I am so dysregulated right now. I am not capable of being a good mother in this moment. The boundary I have to set is on me. Hey, kids, I need a timeout. You don't say this with them, but you're saying this to you. I don't want to vomit my angst all over you right now in this moment. And if I don't get a break, I'm going to do that.
Oh, I've said it to them.
Yeah. And you might as you get older because then they understand. They understand that you're not perfect either and that you need to learn to calm down before you speak, just like they might need to learn to calm down before they speak. And so these are lessons mothers teach their children as they're doing it. Even I remember I was just talking to my granddaughter about this because she was so afraid of, she would feel so humiliated if she made a mistake in public. Like she would just have a meltdown. And if she spilled her candy on the floor, she would just have a meltdown. And so I reminded her that one time we were in the bathroom, a public bathroom, and the door didn't lock. And so I'm sitting on the pot, the door opens and she's standing out there and she's looking at me and I just laughed and I said, oops. And I shut the door and locked it. And we were talking about that. And I said, remember when Nana didn't lock the door properly and the door opened and everybody saw her sitting on the pot and it was pretty embarrassing, but guess what? I survived and you survived and it was fine. And so we teach our children as we survive mishaps. We survive bad decisions. We survive someone not liking us or someone breaking up with us or someone being mad at us or someone being disappointed in us. And we don't fall apart. We teach our children how to do the same. And so these are our internal lessons that we need to learn in order to be a good mother and making decisions, and even bad ones. Hey, we made the wrong decision. Even when we were in New York, I just took my granddaughter to New York for her birthday and it was freezing cold. And we made a decision not to on the subway because there were so many subway scary things happening. And then it was so cold, like zero cold, we had to take the subway. And so we took the subway, but it turned into really good lessons about self-awareness. And hey, look at that girl who's standing at the subway tracks and she's on her cell phone and she's not paying any attention to who's around her. She's an easy target. We don't want to be easy targets. So we step back, we don't use our cell phone when we're on the tracks, and we wait for the train. So those were just lessons that you can make out of, hey, I made a wrong decision. We need to take the subway. And do something from there in teaching your children and learning to make mistakes, learning to make adjustments, making decisions that are on the open for your kids so that you can learn and they can learn how to be the best person that they can be and how to make good decisions, not perfect decisions.
Leslie, I'm sure you've always lived out of your noble self, but just in case you haven't, do you want to share some of your own journey and maybe learning how to live out of your noble self instead of your emotions?
I remember when I was first married, I was a social worker in a hospital. I've shared this story in my professional life where the child abuse laws had just been passed. I was in charge of the emergency room and teaching doctors and nurses how to recognize child abuse. And so I'm a professional in a professional role. And I got wind of the head nurse doing something inappropriate, breaking confidentiality in a medical record, which was totally wrong. She shouldn't have done that. I flew into her office with not a thought about how I was going to handle that. I just flew in on my broom and gave her, whatever. I didn't curse at her, but I was angry. I was unprepared for how I wanted to confront that. I just blasted her with everything I could say and left. And as I left and went home, I felt awful. I felt awful. And so my feelings were informing me that I did not live out of my noble self. I did not behave out of what she did was totally wrong. It was totally wrong. She deserved to be talked to. But how I did it was so contrary to who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up that I was humiliated professionally, personally, spiritually. God just humbled me. And I was humiliated publicly as well, but I was humbled in that, wow, Leslie, just because you're right doesn't mean you have the wherewithal to speak the truth in love in that moment. I was 100% right. And I think women can really relate to this because we can be 100% right and handle it 100% wrong with our spouse, with our kids. I've done that with my kids as well. I've just let my emotions get the best of me because I was so confident that I was right in the moment. And I was right. I was right. And I was wrong. And so I think the lessons I've learned is that when I get that stirred up inside and I'm not sure that I'm right, I usually take a break. I have a boundary, like I can't have this conversation right now. I don't want to deal with this right now. And I spend time with myself and I just journal all my hateful language out, all my anger out. I write letters to people. I never send them, but I get that out because I'm working through the emotions. I'm not shaming my emotions. I'm not saying, oh, you're bad for having them. I'm having them, but I'm not going to let them decide how I'm going to handle the situation on the outside. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to work it through so that I don't regret the actions I took.
Leslie, talk to the woman right now who feels totally stuck when it comes to decision making, or maybe like she's a victim in her circumstances. What would you say to her?
I would say that that's not true. And God calls you to walk in the truth. But you're stuck in knowing which direction to take because you are afraid of the outcome, right? So if you're stuck in a concentration camp and you can't get out right now, right? You don't have the choice to leave. So you might be stuck in a concentration camp kind of marriage right now. And you don't have the choice to leave. At least you don't feel you do. And you might not. You don't have any money. You're sick. Your kids can't get out. All of those kind of things. That may be true. You're stuck in a concentration camp kind of marriage. You still have decisions to make. Even people in concentration camps had decisions to make. Am I going to be bitter? Am I going to be kind to the people in the concentration camps? Am I going to steal from them because I don't have enough food, so I'm going to steal their food? Or am I going to be generous? How am I going to be while I'm at this concentration camp? Viktor Frankl, who was a Jewish psychiatrist who was in a concentration camp during World War II, said this. He said, everything can be stripped from someone except for one thing: their power to choose who they will be in any given situation. And so if you could just, at this stage, maybe you can't change the external. You can't get out of this marriage right now. You don't know how. You don't have the resources. You don't have the strength. All of that. I get it. But you still have choices. So how do you want to be while you're in this marriage? Maybe you've been angry and bitter, and you've just been blasting your children because you don't know what to do about your marriage. You don't need to be that way. You could choose something different. You might not be able to get out of your marriage right now, but you can work internally on who you want to be when you're in a space you don't want to be. And how can you practice it? So let me practice this with you. How many of you who listening to this podcast love being in a traffic jam when you're in a hurry? Nobody. Nobody loves being in a traffic jam. You're feeling stressed. You're feeling angry. You need to get to the airport. You need to get to the mall. You need to get to work. You need to get to a haircut appointment, wherever. And you're stuck in traffic. You can't change that. So when the external in your life, there's no decisions. You can't get off the highway. You don't have a helicopter to fly over it. There's no decisions to make. You're just stuck. Do you have any choices? You do. How are you going to be in the car while you're in this traffic jam?
It's getting too close to home now, Leslie.
Yeah, you have but if you're not even conscious that you have a choice, you're just going to be emotional. You're going to be screaming. You're going to be yelling. You're going to be upset. You're going to be crying. You're going to be calling everybody. And you can do that if you want. Or you can say, wow, I'm stuck in this traffic. I probably am going to miss my airplane. I'm going to miss my haircut. Now, how do I want to handle this moment? I have choices. I can trust God. I can turn on some easy listening music. I can put on an Audible book. If I'm going to be sitting here for a while, I might as well learn something. I have choices here. And once you become empowered to recognize, I don't have to just sit here angry. I have to just sit here. But how I sit here is totally my choice. There's a very powerful feeling that comes over you that you begin to exercise that more and more in different situations. And you begin to recognize when I cannot change the external, I'm in this destructive marriage. I cannot change that right now. I cannot leave. I cannot change my husband. I've tried talking to him. Nothing's changing here. How am I going to be here is my next question and my next decision. And sometimes being quiet and passive is a good decision. If I were in a concentration camp, I wasn't going to make much noise because my abuser's not going to change. And so being quiet and passive might be my best decision right now to stay safe. Take it, make it, but also make decisions about your escape plan. How am I going to get out of here? Am I going to take some online classes so I can begin to educate myself and get a job? Am I going to join a support group for Christian women in destructive marriages so I can do it in a godly way? What am I going to do? What choices do I have if I can't get out of the situation to grow through the situation?
We have a lot of ladies that are part of your coaching and support groups, and their husbands don't know because maybe he's not happy with it or whatever it is. And so they make sure when they're on the calls that they're in a room by themselves. And, I know some people would call that rebellious. I call it wisdom.
Of saying, hey, I need help to learn how to be in this situation in a better way than I've been. Because right now, if you're married to a destructive husband and you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, oh my gosh, I am this person, I want to just give you some math. Your husband's unhealthy, toxic, destructive. Where are you in this healthy meter? Are you getting unhealthy, toxic, destructive? Maybe in a completely different way. Maybe you're passively acquiescing. You're getting more depressed. You're feeling suicidal. You're feeling homicidal. All of the feelings that we have when we're in that place, right? So he's toxic, oppressive. You're getting unhealthy, toxic, depressed. And now you've got unhealthy, toxic, unhealthy, toxic. What do you think that's doing to the littles in your family?
Poison.
Poison gas everywhere. So you can't change him, but you can change you. Unhealthy, toxic, and healthy does not make a great relationship. Please don't think that if you do your work, he's going to change. He could, but often he doesn't. But if you get healthy and strong, it makes a huge difference to the littles who are there, who are watching. And if you end up leaving this relationship, you are able to show them a completely different pattern for how we are inside and how we do relationships on the outside. And that can make a huge difference in their life journey.
Leslie, pray for them, please.
Oh, Lord, you tell us in your word that you will instruct us and guide us in the way we should go. You will counsel us with your eye upon us. That when we turned left and we should have turned right, you will tap us on the shoulder and tell us to turn around. We can count on that, Lord, so we don't need to be afraid of making bad decisions. We need to ask for your wisdom and we need to make decisions and then self-correct when we're making wrong decisions. Lord, I pray for the people who are listening to this podcast, whether they're in a toxic marriage or they're not, but they're just not taking ownership and responsibility for their decision maker. You tell us, men and women, choose life. Choose life. Just because we're a woman doesn't mean we don't choose. We do. Help us to learn to choose well. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for listening to Relationship Truth Unfiltered. You know that feeling when you're sitting there thinking, I can't keep doing this anymore, but you have no idea what to do next? That's exactly why Leslie created this webinar. After working with thousands of women stuck in impossible situations, she saw the same patterns coming up over and over. Good women completely exhausted from trying to fix someone else's problems. Here's the thing. If you've been resonating with what you heard today about decision making and feeling stuck, this webinar is your next step. It's called I'm Not Okay When You're Not Okay, and it cuts through all the usual advice you've probably heard a million times. No more just pray or try harder to submit. Instead, you'll learn exactly how to build your own internal strength, even if your spouse never changes. Look, I know signing up for a webinar might feel like a small thing when your relationship problems feel massive, but this could be the turning point where you finally start feeling like yourself again. Head to leslievernick.com/okay. You'll be amazed at how many other women are dealing with exactly what you're going through. Don't let another year go by feeling trapped and depleted. Check out leslievernick.com/okay. Until next time, may God bless all of your relationships with Him, with yourself, and with others.